We've obtained these architectural plans. I've got them in my hand from newer architecture firm for the expansion of one prison in Kingston Collins Bay, and I'm showing it to our viewers. And it shows there a side view. There's a desk, and then there's a window, and then those two jutting out pictures are really supposed to be bunks. And it says here, provision for future upper bed, provide weld plates only. Essentially, this is plans to double bunk. What do you make of these plans?
Well, for me, it suggests three things. First, that perhaps the Correctional Service of Canada is developing the infrastructure and the capability to normalize double bunking, which is, currently seen as a temporary and exceptional practice. That this would be happening despite the fact that there are UN minimum standards for the treatment of prisoners in place that discourage this practice, despite the fact that Commissioner's Directive 550 is in place that says single accommodation is the most correctionally appropriate way of accommodating prisoners, despite the fact that even CSC's own Senior Deputy Commissioner issued a briefing note to Minister Taves in February 2010 stating that increasing the use of double bunking puts institutional security at risk, puts staff at risk, puts prisoners at risk. It's also happening too when we know that prison guards have recently been on the record stating that they do not want double bunking to become a permanent feature of Canada's federal penitentiary system. This is going to make their working conditions that much more difficult. We also know that people, for instance, like Jeremy Phillips, who was double bunked and was killed while he was double bunked, it puts the lives of prisoners at risk, and that can lead to lawsuits that are going to be footed by Canadian taxpayers. So that's one set of problems. Now,
I've spoken on this program, Justin Piche, to Minister Vic Taves before about double bunking, and he says they're okay with double bunking. Let me show you, by the way, what another quotation, because I'm trying to figure out how widespread this is. Here's a quotation that we've got here from an Ontario construction report, and this goes to the crime bill that will require additional spaces at prisons. And it says, well, the cell units are designed for single beds. Provision is made to add a second bed to each unit if double bunking is required at some point in the future. That's from January 2012. Is it prudent then just to sort of have preparations in the event that double bunking may be needed for overcrowding? Is this prudent, or is this essentially building the infrastructure to do double bunking to prisoners to cells designed specifically for one?
Well, I think part of the problem, and this was alluded to last week with the release of the recent Parliamentary Budget Officer's report on the impact of Bill C-10, which focused on a very, very small part of that piece of legislation that impacts the provinces and territories. One of the problems he identified that didn't allow him to identify the rest of the impacts of that bill is the fact that the government has not been transparent with providing Canadians with information they need to see what those impacts will be. So we don't have the methodologies to actually determine whether or not we're going to have significant influxes in the federal penitentiary system, even though they've given us numbers. Like, there's no way for Canadians to verify those figures. So, I mean, we have to find out what those are first before, we can answer the infrastructure question. But, I mean, if they're putting these things in place, it basically facilitates that process where they could move towards more double bunking, which facilitates a whole other series of new punishment legislation that they could introduce to fill our prisons with.
Vic Taves on this program in May saying double bunking is not a big deal. It's an important aspect of facilities. It's constitutional. It's legal. Many Western democracies do it. There's nothing inappropriate about that. That's what Vic Taves told us. I have about 10 seconds here, Mr. Piche. There's a lot of expansion of prisons going on. If there are double bunking for the communities that are going to be living with these prisons, what will that mean for the potential capacity of these prisons?
Well, basically, if we're talking about Bath Institution, it was announced as a 96-bed unit. If they're going to be double bunking these cells, that means 192 beds. That's like half of an average sized federal institution in their backyards without consultation. So, I mean, they've gone and announced these 34 projects across Canada with a certain level of beds in mind, and potentially we're looking at double, depending on the influx of new prisoners over the next few years. Which right now it's coming in lower, but the cumulative impacts of these pieces of legislation will be seen over the long term, not just over a year or two.
All right, fascinating new developments as we try to make some sense of these drawings. Are these prisons being prepared for double the amount of inmates than have currently been announced? Justin Piche, I appreciate your time today. Thanks.
All right, thank you.